Hi, and welcome to the WVD weekly podcast. This is our very first podcast, so we're not quite sure how it's going to go. I'm Neil McLaughlin. We've got Stefan Digman on the phone podcast, and Tom Hickling. So, Stefan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, hello. My name is Stefans Background, from the Netherlands, 31 years old. Been a consultant for over a few years. I'm mainly focusing right now on the modern desktop, modern workplace, and a lot of WVD stuff.
Good.
So, and with us is Tom Hickling.
Yep. Yeah, hello. So yeah, my name's Tom Hickling. I'm a Windows Virtual Desktop Global Black Belt at Microsoft. That has nothing to do with any kind of martial arts. It's just there to denote a specialization. So there's lots of global black belts in Microsoft, specifically around new products, products that are in incubation or have just been released, or products that are particularly complex. So we have permanent global black belts for things like networking and SAP, for example. So I've been around in Microsoft for approaching 5 years now. I started as a cloud solution architect, and then, which was great. It was I took a step away from end user computing, which was fantastic, but it drew me back in again. You can never escape.
Yep.
And that was when Citrix released Citrix Cloud, and then there was massive interest in our customers, and I started a relationship between Microsoft UK and Citrix UK around driving Citrix Cloud on Azure for our sort of joint customers. And that's effectively started off pulling me back into end user computing to the point where I've now ended up being completely dedicated again, obviously in the context of WVD.
Good. Yeah, I'm Neil McLaughlin. I've been around for a while now, around 20 years in IT. I currently work at a company called New Signature. I'm a Citrix and WVD technical architect. I've probably spent the past 10 years doing nothing but Citrix, but decided to make the jump beginning of the year to try and focus on Citrix and WVD, because it seems kind of where the market's going, and I've kind of fallen in love with the technology. So yeah, that's me. So yeah, let's make a start to the Q&A. So Stefan, do you want to begin with the questions?
Yes. So, well, Tom, we prepared a few questions for you.
Yeah.
So, first things first. Can you tell us something more about how you got involved with WVD? From when did it start for you?
Well, I suppose it started for me back before WVD was even created. So Microsoft had a thing called Azure Remote App, which was RDS effectively from the cloud as a service. So it was great, but it was actually the first Azure service to actually go end of life, and there was a number of reasons behind that. That was my first sort of introduction to Microsoft's end user computing capabilities coming out of Azure. Then when I joined Microsoft, like I said, I started working on Citrix Cloud projects that were all running on Azure. And after we ended the Azure Remote App product, then that was the beginnings of what is now WVD. But there was a product in between called RDMI. I don't know whether anybody remembers that, Remote Desktop Modern Infrastructure, which was the precursor to what WVD has become. So there was an internal Microsoft employee-only private preview for that capability. This is going back maybe 3-4 years now, and just got on board with that. And there was a small community in Microsoft UK as well as Microsoft Global, just around internal people testing the hell out of it and finding problems and sort of talking about it. That then grew to WVD, and then there was obviously another internal community for that. And that just grew and grew and grew to the point that it went into public preview. There was expected demand for it from our customers, and then Microsoft created this global black belt team specifically for WVD, which is run actually out of Microsoft corporate, not Microsoft in any of the local areas. So that's what enables this team to get quite close support from the product group. So the PMs as well as the developers of the actual product.
Okay, that's good. So that's been like pushed back, because I noticed like one thing which I've been impressed about is how open Microsoft have been without this whole
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
Obviously, Scott Manchester has been pushing it publicly, and there's been a lot of webcasts about it and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really impressive to see the new Microsoft kind of embracing this technology.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
the way
no, it's
that
good.
they're kind of listening to their customers and helping them publicly and stuff. So
Yeah,
it's
well, I think
quite
that's
impressive.
actually that's a result of Azure, I think. So
Mm.
Azure is obviously a massively broad service with, well, who would have thought Linux, Microsoft would be pushing Linux, but 50% of our VMs running in Azure are Linux distros. So that means having open community, and we're one of the biggest contributors on GitHub. So, we're all open source, which is great, which has then, I think, encouraged this sort of flourishing of community more than has ever been in the past. And that's paying dividends now, like you're saying.
Yeah, okay. So obviously the big news last week was the spring update.
Yep.
I know a lot of people have been waiting for this because I don't know about everyone else, but myself, we kind of see the previous WVD as kind of version 1.
Yep.
Obviously, where version 2, you start to make big improvements in the product. Spring Update seems to have brought those improvements. So can you tell us a bit more about Spring Update?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing is the name. It's obviously the autumn/winter update in the southern hemisphere. Which is perhaps a little bit confusing, but the point here is that Azure doesn't have any versions, okay? WVD also doesn't have any versions because it's effectively a platform that's going to get constant updates. So we, as Microsoft, drop in updates every day to Azure. There will be updates appearing in WVD regularly at a regular cadence. There will also be these significant updates. So Spring Update is this significant update. And hence it will sort of get its own name. But the point here is expect lots of change going forward over time, but also at periodic sort of major events. So the biggest update, which I think is what everybody has been waiting for, is that actually that WVD has now become what's referred to as an ARM service. ARM is Azure Resource Manager, and Azure Resource Manager is the component that sits between users effectively and the underlying hardware in our data centers. So it's a massively complex piece of, well, it's beyond software, but basically it takes in all of the API calls from wherever they might be coming from, the portal, PowerShell, CLI, REST API, whatever it might be, and then initiates that command against numerous what's referred to as resource providers. So, for example, there's a compute resource provider. That's the service that compiles all of the compute. It works in conjunction with a network provider for NICs that come together to make a virtual machine, for example. So WVD up until this point has not been an ARM service or an object. It's been actually stored separately in a sort of proprietary database, effectively. So what that means is that now it's an Azure service, now that it's an ARM service, you get all of the benefits that Azure brings to any kind of workload. The most visual one of those is the Azure portal. So now customers can go directly to the Azure portal and go and deploy Windows Virtual Desktop natively end-to-end, whereas in the past, it's been PowerShell. There's been a simple Azure Web App Service, web components to go and do some of that administration. So that also then brings a whole load of other benefits. So Azure AD groups. Now I know this has been a problem and a bit of an issue for large customers because we only supported AD user objects. So it was time consuming to add lots of groups, or groups of users, I should say. So now natively out of the box, we support AD groups. We also support Azure RBAC, role-based access control. Now this has been around and it's for some time, and it's predominantly around providing admin level sort of delegation to objects inside of Azure. So that service now enables us to provide delegation across all of the WVD objects. So an organization could separate out their host pools, application groups, etc., via RBAC. But what it also does. RBAC is what is enabling us to provide Azure AD users and groups. So there's another resource provider called the desktop virtualization resource provider, and this, you might have to register this when you initially deploy WVD, because all of these resource providers do sort of require registration when they're first deployed. So that's what enables us to provide that user access. There's one of the additional benefits is we can now scale out these virtual machines natively inside of the Azure portal. So prior to that, you had to rerun the templates, specify existing host pools and resource groups, and then do a little bit of maths around the number of virtual machines you want added. So we've simplified that significantly by just saying, I want this pool, I'm going to expand it by X number of virtual machines. So that's a nice, handy little feature. And monitoring's been significantly improved. So now you can directly link WVD objects to any number of log analytics workspaces. And in fact, you can also send out your log information to Azure storage. But log analytics is our logging service, and it provides lots of reports and visualizations. And again, to enable organizations that have some kind of delegation, you can specify which host pool, for example, goes off to which log analytics workspace. So if you've got lots of business units that want some kind of separation, you can also achieve that. And then perhaps the other one that gets a lot of customer questions is the metadata. So this is just the data about your configuration. So these users have access to these host pools, for example. Up until this point in time, it's only been able to store that in the US. So for customers that have some kind of sovereignty concerns, that might be an issue. And we've got some customers that said, well, we're not going to use WVD until we can get that metadata stored in the UK or in the EU. So ARM has enabled that capability. Now, it's not fully live yet, even in the preview. We do support a whole host of US regions, but by the time, hopefully, we go GA, we will be supporting some regions on this side of the pond. So that then opens up a whole host of opportunities for customers that do have those sort of sovereignty issues. And then the final thing off the top of my head is native PowerShell support. So prior to this, there's been a dedicated PowerShell module. So we've now built that into an existing PowerShell. So AZ WVD. So that is just standard, nothing particular to have to go and deploy.
Great. So
a lot of new things.
A lot of new things. Yeah.
So when is it due to go GA then? Obviously, you mentioned it's in preview. So
yeah. So it's currently in preview, public preview. It's due to go GA in this half of the year. So hopefully by the end of this half is all I suppose I could say at this point. It should be going GA. So it's not the point is it's not a long way off, which is good news.
Good. Stefan, do you want to do the next question?
Yes. So since a few weeks, Neil and myself created the WVD community. Yeah. And I would like to thank you first of all for your help and involvement of getting that up and running. It's great to see that, and just spoke to Neil about this one. We already get 77 members on our Slack community, and the weekly newsletters. So, well,
good.
Thank you very much for your help in this one.
That's all right. Well done for starting it in the first place.
Yeah, it's just so lovely to see this new Microsoft and the way they're kind of embracing this thing. I mean, stuff like this could just not have happened previously, right?
Yeah.
The way we used to work.
Yeah.
Obviously, with yourself and obviously Christian and Jim Moyle, just being so open and public and helping customers. I know previously in the past where I've had to go to Microsoft to ask questions, and it's always been log a support call or we'll get back to you, and no one ever gets back to you. And just to have this complete openness is it's what's driving the products, really. It's
absolutely.
what's making them so better, because the users have so much input. Into what happens. So
and that runs all the way through. To be honest, Microsoft has changed quite a lot, and we are listening significantly more to customers, and that's really what we're here to do, to make customers successful as much as we can. So if that involves passing their information and their request directly into the product group, and the product group appreciate it because they need to know what's happening out there in the field and with customers directly, because there is the possibility of them just getting slightly isolated developing stuff, but it needs to be meeting what customers are expecting, really.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't wait for, well, if you look at the solution as it is now, so for me personally, for when it goes GA, when you get all the Teams integration and when you get all the MSI app attach, it's going to be something pretty amazing to deploy.
Yeah, and it should be I think it should be game changing, particularly with the combination, like you said, MSI app attach would solve the application problems, combined with a cloud-based orchestration and administration service with the flexibility and the choice, and I suppose the horsepower that Azure provides in terms of choice and flexibility around the virtual machines that these are all running on, is just a perfect combination that up until this point has just never been possible at all. So it's good times for this end user computing workload. Yeah,
me and Stefan were having a chat this morning around sort of integrating WVD into DevOps pipelines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And as you said, when you think about that and the power that can bring, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah. And who would have thought that would have been possible, that you could write some code and then have a continuous pipeline to pump out virtual machines at the end of the day and have users connecting onto them. It's
to create
a
modify
new
the
era.
workspaces.
It's good.
Yep.
Do you want to do the next question, Stefan?
Yes. So a lot of customers are already seeing like the benefits of WVD, especially when they already got their Microsoft 365 licenses, and at the end I think the power of it, they only have to get up the resources, the users get licensed, but what are, from your experience, the biggest benefits for customers when they are going to use like WVD?
Yeah, so I think the first one you've alluded to, the fact is that the vast majority of customers don't have to buy a license for this. It's licensed, or it's entitled via a license that they already own. So that's great. And customers love it when they hear that they don't have to go to buy anything, which is kind of unheard of coming from Microsoft of old, maybe. And then I suppose the other benefits we hear, and particularly perhaps in my previous role, which was just a generalist around Azure architecture for customers, we got lots of customers trying to get out of managing data centers because they might be an insurance company or a bank. They don't do data centers, and it's not part of their core business. So why not give that to someone else who's really, really good at it, which obviously Microsoft are very good at. And so in that course, they'd be migrating pretty much everything out of their data centers. And we do have some customers that have closed down on-premise data centers because they've migrated all of their workloads out of it. There are others that are doing things piecemeal, and there are others that are just looking at specific workloads. But those organizations that are trying to reduce or completely remove their data center footprint, at some point they're going to come up with their virtual desktop estate, and that's going to be the next workload that needs to move out of their data centers. And Azure is now the perfect place to do that. So, the combination of having WVD as a managed service, the choice of all of the virtual machines in our IaaS service for the compute for that service, combined with Office 365 and potentially Dynamics or any of the other services they might have, enables this almost like a no-brainer solution for them end to end to enable this sort of consistent user experience, but just taking advantage of everything that's available from Azure. And you've probably seen the list is as long as your arm of all of the available services that have Azure, and many of them have some relevance over a virtual desktop product that was never been possible before, because obviously that's run historically always on premises. So it's that sort of combination of what Azure can provide behind a virtual desktop that we're seeing, the most amount of interest, I suppose, from our customers that are deploying this.
Yeah, it's certainly very impressive to see, because a lot of the stuff which you explain is at no extra cost as well, really, isn't it? It's kind of like we're used to deploying solutions where everything that you add on has an extra cost associated to it.
Yep.
But a lot of the things that you get with all this, you don't have to pay anything extra for, which is just mind blowing.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose the other benefit is, and this applies to all of our IaaS services, of which the virtual machines that make up WVD are is a big component. But customers, they've bought massive amounts of infrastructure and put it into their data. So massive SANs, hundreds, if not thousands of servers, and that's a sunk cost. So they might have to pay for that over 5 years, regardless of how much is being used. Azure gives them the capability to say, well, as soon as we're not using this, we're going to power off these virtual machines, and Microsoft stop charging for the compute elements of those virtual machines. So it does provide customers this new capability of saying, well, it's a pure consumption model for our virtual desktop estate. So, we might have users that are sort of 9 to 5, let's just say simplistically. Outside of that time, there's nobody using our platform. So why are we paying for it? So Azure now is, as it's a public cloud, is the mechanism for doing that. That's just unprecedented and hasn't been possible in virtual desktop estates on premises. Even though you might potentially be able to power off the physical hardware, there's no cost savings from doing that because you've paid for that hardware.
Yeah, so I come from up until probably a year, 6 to 12 months ago, I come from an on-prem background. So I'm used to deploying Citrix platforms where we've got to go out and spend £3-5 million on a load of kit. And then we've got to spend the next 3 months sticking on a data center and creating firewall rules. And then we've got to spend another 2 months creating a golden image and testing it and stuff like that. And now to have the ability to basically do all of that within a couple of hours.
Yeah, exactly. So we call that phenomenon being able to fail fast. So failing historically, I suppose, when you've spent a lot of money on infrastructure is a massive problem. Whereas, in the cloud, if you fail, that's basically your first opportunity now to get it right a second time. And you've only paid for what you've consumed in that period of time. So if you've done something and realized, actually, we've made a mistake in our calculations, we need to start again, or maybe we've chosen the wrong virtual machines, well, let's just start again. We've only paid for that. Let's go and deploy a whole lot more and retest. And now we're confident that we've got the right numbers and we're good to go without, anybody putting their jobs on the line effectively.
Absolutely. So can you share with us some big success stories that you've had with customers?
Well, I suppose
stories that have made the biggest impact.
Yeah, I suppose most of them have been related to coronavirus. So there's been lots of sort of projects that were kicked off prior to this, but because of COVID, it's effectively it seems like a long way back in the past. But we do have lots of customers that have gone over perhaps a weekend and gone and deployed. I think the biggest one we've had over a weekend after COVID was a German company who deployed 6,000 VMs. 6,000 WVD VMs for their users, and then were productive on the Monday morning for those users. Wow. So they sent home all of their employees, and then on the Monday they were productive again. So that's just unheard of. And I think all of the successes over the last 6 weeks have been all related to coronavirus. So there was one customer that spoke to me about this. They sent all of their users home because their office was in central London, so nobody could go in. But just before they left, they were dishing out laptops to everybody, and they just ran out. They just did not have enough laptops, nowhere near enough laptops for all of their employees. So the only solution was some kind of virtual desktop estate. And the guy that went and deployed this, again, did it over a short period of time and was just blown away by the fact that, within a couple of days, he had the remaining workforce that didn't have a laptop. They were again consuming their line of business apps and just doing their day job from home. So whilst COVID was never in the planning for this, And whilst remote working has always been a pillar of both WVD and Citrix and VMware, that's always been one of the prime use cases in sort of the marketing material. It's now actually happened in real anger and been forced upon everybody, rather than people thinking, oh well, let's have a remote access solution for a large, if not all of our, a large portion, if not all of our users. That's now become an absolute harsh reality. And what we found is that in the vast majority of those cases, the platform stands, and customers and users, and important users, so some people with critical roles during this time period are able to continue working. So we also had a customer that was part of the NHS, so a GP's or an NHS trust that was enabling their GPs to work from home, or consuming all of their sort of doctors' applications. So the real benefit of that use case is that WVD just disappeared behind the scenes. Nobody actually knew or cared that it was WVD. It was just the fact that doctors were continuing to be able to dispense medicine through their applications, but doing so from home. So keeping people healthy was the real use case here, and the real success. So yeah, no, there's stories like that coming out of the woodwork left, right, and centre that we can't really keep up with. But those are some that were on my mind anyway.
I think the company work. Obviously, we've got Citrix Cloud and the 10x Frame and stuff like that. They've only really been about probably for the past couple of years, right? So I'd hate to think how companies would have responded without this COVID-19 if we didn't have those kind of solutions in place.
Well, yeah, exactly. People would have been busily upgrading their VPN links, and that would have taken days, weeks, possibly months. So there would have been, massive amounts of people that just couldn't do anything from home. So we would have all been sent home, and large portions of the population would have been unproductive. So, whilst it's still not, by far, it's not ideal circumstances, this technology has made it a real possibility that lots and lots of people can still be productive at home. So
yeah. So we just talked about a few success stories, Tom, but I can understand there are also a few challenges for customers. Like, for example, when they're not already moved to Azure, their backend is still running on premises. So what are the common challenges which you will see on the customer sides?
Yeah, so I think the first one perhaps is a perception. What Azure is great at is that you can go to the Azure portal and basically switch something on. So for example, let's just say you were a developer and you needed somewhere to store some data. So in a couple of minutes, you can go and just deploy Azure SQL DB, and you get a connection string, you feed that into your application, and you're done. So it's effectively a light switch. It's on, and you're ready to go. Whilst that is kind of similar with WVD, obviously we all know that there's a whole load of complexity around things like applications, user profiles, sizing, all of that kind of stuff, unfortunately, doesn't disappear just because it's WVD. And I think lots of customers think, oh, we can just go and switch this thing on and we're good to go, which is only partially true. So, hopefully in the future, we'll see something that does improve that significantly. But today, customers still need to understand their estate. That the requirement is that customers still need to understand their applications, what the application usage, the resource utilization of applications looks like, so that they can go and then correctly size and deploy in Azure. Now, we kind of said earlier that we now provide this capability of failing fast, but it doesn't take away that the customer still needs to kind of know their estate before they're embarking on this. Having any kind of Azure knowledge is a massive benefit. It's not massively complex, and it's very similar, I suppose, in terms of the standard. So standard networking applies in Azure. There are some differences. So having that sort of background knowledge of infrastructure, particularly cloud infrastructure, is also a requirement. There's lots of kind of smaller things that we typically find that customers rush into, that perhaps they don't understand some of the requirements. So but it's the same thing that happens on premises. So probably one of the number one things that people miss was DNS inside of Azure. So when we go and deploy WVD host pools, the VMs need to join a domain. They obviously need to be able to contact the domain controller. And if customers haven't set the DNS settings on the VNet, then it fails. And it was just, lots and lots of failures in that area.
That's I've seen that so many times.
Yeah.
It's always DNS.
Yeah, and that comment is exactly true, and it remains to be true in Azure, unfortunately. So customers just need to, I suppose, read the documentation to understand exactly what they're doing. But we take away a lot of the headaches around the management of all of those RDS roles, much like Citrix Cloud does in terms of Citrix capabilities. So that's taken care of, but still understanding the core plumbing, let's say, in Azure that's required to host these workloads.
Do you still see a lot of people deploying WVD on top of Citrix? Because obviously they work together, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that it's actually done is and admittedly I made this mistake before, thinking that it was WVD on top of Citrix. What Citrix actually done, and this applies to VMware as well, they are allowed to provide to their customers the benefits of Windows Virtual Desktop. And really the main benefit, besides it being a management service, is Windows 10 multi-session, which is obviously this combination of effectively the RDS scalability capability combined with the true rich Windows 10 user experience. So what Citrix enable is for Citrix customers to consume the Citrix Cloud Management Plane using all of the Citrix technology, so HTX, or ICA, as well as all of the other Citrix components, Studio Director, NetScaler, all that kind of stuff, but also consume Windows 10 multi-session. So what it is for Citrix Cloud customers, it's great because it's Citrix end-to-end, but with the one thing that is really the hero solution from WVD that kind of makes the big difference. So obviously they could go WVD native and they will be using a different management plane, which is obviously the WVD management plane. But like you said, there's still many, many customers out there with Citrix on premises, or they've already gone to Citrix Cloud, but now they want to take advantage of that hero solution, which they absolutely can do just by being able to consume Windows 10 multi-session through Citrix Cloud.
Good. So obviously WVD, we're about a year in now. So when it's initially released, right?
It was released.
Public preview.
Yeah. Oh, in public preview, yes, probably. It went GA. What was that? The 30th of September of last
September
year.
2019 was the first. Was GA.
Yeah, because I was actually over in Redmond that week for sort of an internal training session on WVD. So it was kind of perfect timing, and it kind of just resonated that this team was over in Redmond speaking to the product group. The day after that was that it actually went GA. So yeah, that date does stick in my mind quite well.
So it's still quite young, really, isn't it?
It's very young. Yeah. Yeah.
So where do you see, obviously, what's, I know you probably can't share everything, but what's in store for the next 12 months for us? Obviously, I know there's going to be a lot of stuff because for what we've seen from the past 6 months alone. So what can we expect in the next sort of 12 months or so?
So there's things on the public roadmap. So things like Teams optimization, we get lots and lots of interest about that. So that is definitely coming. So that will be, again, a sort of a bit of a game changer because obviously customers want to use Teams predominantly for voice and video calling. Now it works, everything else works fine, but voice and video is unoptimized at this point. When that's optimized, then the user experience would be basically as it is on a physical device. That's the development target anyway. So that's coming. We've already mentioned MSIX app attach. So that's going to be quite a substantial game changer for managing applications, and then that enables us really to get to the nirvana of a complete separation of the compute from the profile from the application. So we do get to that capability of having a virtual desktop estate made up of cattle completely, which we really don't care about those virtual machines. What we really care about is the applications, the profile to provide the user experience. And that's what's truly important to organizations. A couple of other things. So there's a thing called RDP Short Path that's being developed. Now, this has actually taken a bit of a hit because of coronavirus, so that's been pushed out slightly. But the point for this product or capability is to reduce the latency to get to the virtual machines. So currently, as it stands, a customer connects from their device, wherever that might be, going through the closest management plane, through to the virtual machine that they host in their Azure subscription, and they can place them wherever they want in any of our 56 and growing Azure regions. And then the reverse of that, the reverse traffic follows that same flow. What RDP Short Path will do in conjunction with ExpressRoute is it will allow the user to connect to the management plane and then be told what the IP address is of their virtual machine, and then they will be able to connect privately across ExpressRoute directly into their VNet. So bypassing our management plane. So the idea is to try to reduce latency as much as possible. ExpressRoute is obviously that private dedicated connection which has low latency. So if customers have that, then they might as well take advantage of that to get access to those virtual machines. So, and there's an advanced event-based scaling service that's currently under development. So that will be coming out in the coming months for the rest of this year, and just expect a number of sort of smaller improvements dropping into the platform. What I would also say is that going back to my previous point around this being an Azure service now, what Azure provides, like I said, is a whole host of additional capability that's never been possible to combine with a virtual desktop estate. So we should expect to see both from Microsoft and, for that matter, from a broad set of partners, which will also increase in number, are things like potentially talking about scaling. We've got a service called IoT Hub, which takes telemetry from millions, if not billions, of IoT-enabled devices. Now, if those IoT devices were things like, I don't know, a car park, for example, when cars are parking in the car park out the front, although perhaps because of coronavirus, that might not be happening so much, or security barriers where people are swiping their cards to get in. If that was IoT enabled, Azure could know that Joe Bloggs has just walked through the building, the security barrier at the front, or for that matter, we might be able to determine that 75% of our users have just parked up in the car park in the last 20 minutes. Well, let's go and power on all of the virtual machines required for those users. And we also have, a rich pre-existing machine learning service, which can, do all of this kind of understanding and searching for patterns across, vast data sets. Again, the combination of all of those things can produce some quite interesting capabilities that we could then apply to a virtual desktop. So I'm not saying any of that's coming, but I'm saying what's possible is the combination of lots of different Azure services, which exist now, and perhaps new ones that will come on board, that can then provide value to an organization that's running a wide virtual desktop estate, perhaps operating at significant scale. So 10, 20,000 users, for example. So, and all of that is really designed to make the user experience better and potentially driving down costs. So if we can enhance and enrich the capabilities of, powering on and powering off, large parts of this estate, that's going to drive down costs for customers. So provide an overall better user experience for the organization.
Whoa.
Good. It's amazing to see what's going to come. Is there anything else that you want to speak to?
Yeah, I suppose the only other part, perhaps on that, is more Azure regions being supported. So as you've probably seen in the preview and while it's GA, the management plane only exists in a certain number of Azure regions. Now that's going to grow over time as the platform is pushed out to those additional Azure regions. And as I don't know, we've seen to be deploying a whole host of new regions recently. So New Zealand, Poland, Italy are getting new Azure regions. So that's going to grow, at perhaps a similar rate around the globe. So currently, I think we've got 56 regions that are online, and we've probably got another, I've kind of lost track, but maybe 3, 4, 5 regions that have either been announced or are under construction. Over time, those additional Azure regions will get that WVD management plane. So the user experience for users distributed all over the globe will continue to improve as those management planes get rolled out closer to where their user estate exists.
Awesome. Stefan, have you got any more questions for Tom?
No, I don't think so. I've got a lot of information, a lot of new things happening, a lot of new stuff is on its way. I'm really looking forward to the Teams optimization of WVD, and still waiting for some documentations about the RM templates for the new spring release.
Yeah, that'll be coming shortly. That's one of the things that's been asked. So the product group have said that that's definitely coming. So again, just watch out for announcements. The other thing that's worth saying as well is keep providing any feedback. So anything that you either found yourself or from customers or whatever it might be, it's great to get your feedback from, feet on the ground, so to speak, or directly from the customer. There's no guarantee that anything potentially could happen from it, but people are listening, so they're very keen to hear problems that customers are facing or requests on their niche use case, and we would do our best to pass that back, and then do our best to to drive that forward, and then for the product group to potentially release that into the future, into the platform. So thanks for I suppose everything that you guys do as well.
So is Teams definitely coming this month then? Because every time I read it, it's Teams coming next month. Teams is coming next month. Is it? Have we got a confirmed date yet? Or?
We haven't got a confirmed date. We've got an intention, let's just say. So it should be this month, starting in a public preview. Like with anything, these dates can shift. And I suppose this is quite a volatile time in terms of even our developers being able to be fully productive. So whilst it's an intention, there is the chance that those dates can slide slightly. But the point here is it's imminent. So watch this space.
Yeah, I mean, myself and a few colleagues have been testing it on a few customers, and it actually works.
It does, yeah.
But obviously the experience is not as it could be.
Yeah.
Obviously it's quite a lot of CPU hit on the VMs, but
yeah,
it works as it is. But I wouldn't want to roll it out to production.
No, and you probably wouldn't want to roll it out to thousands of users.
No.
Let's say. But you're right, it does work, and I've been using it and actually have at low scale, obviously, but have not been able to find any problems with it. But that's obviously because I'm just myself. But I suppose it just shows the platform itself and the product is it's in a good shape as it stands today. It's just these optimizations that we just need to get across the board to finish that.
Good.
Nice.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to speak to Tom about, Stefan?
No, not me.
No, not for me.
Good. Well, we'll give you the rest of your afternoon back. Go and enjoy the sun.
Yeah, makes a change, doesn't it?
Yeah. How was your bike ride?
It was good. It was good. Yeah. Although my son's bike broke on the way there, so that was a bit annoying. But it was just nice to be outside rather than being looking at the same four walls every single day.
Every single day.
Yeah, it's going to be nice to get back to normal.
It will be, actually. Yeah, it will be nice to get back traveling and meeting people.
Even though it will take some time, I think.
It will take some time. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, we'll end it there. Thanks for your time, Tom, and your continued support for the community. So continue what you're doing, and yeah.
No problem. Happy to help. No problem.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks.